Hello friends, welcome back to my channel! Hey everybody, welcome back to Tumble Creatures YouTube channel. Today I have a video for you where I'm going to be doing some detail work on these cute little, I have some geckos and some hedgehogs that I'm going to be doing some detail work on. And I thought I would video that, and then I'm going to do a voiceover talking to you about how to find your artistic style. That's more commonly talked about, but what I'm going to refer to it is how to find your artistic voice. Because I feel like when we talk about what's our art style, looking for an art style, so many times we focus on finding that thing without realizing that style is really just a different word for our artistic voice. And our artistic voice is so unique and innate to our own personality that it's not like something you can steal, it's something that you can develop and find over time. So I'm going to be talking to you about some tips that I have that have worked for me, or some things that I have learned along my art career, and I'm going to share them with you. So let's go ahead and get into the video of finishing up these cute little guys. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get started. I have some acrylic paint and satin glaze, gloss glaze, a variety of brushes, and my sculptures. So let's go ahead and talk about finding your own artistic voice. Last week I had a question box in my Instagram stories, and one question that I kept getting over and over again was, how do you find your art style, or how do you find your artistic voice? And I think that finding an art style is a very commonly asked question, especially by beginner artists or artists who are looking to really make their mark and have a career for themselves. I think all artists want their art to be recognizable, to have people look at it and realize and know exactly who made that work. And I think this is a great question, and it's something that I have had a lot of experience with, and I am very excited to talk about it. So I have some tips here. I have 6 tips. I'm going to go over them with you one by one, and I'm going to talk about some things that helped me find my own artistic voice. So when I started becoming an artist, I was a watercolor artist, and something that I really struggled with in the beginning of learning watercolor was learning how the paint could behave and how I could express my ideas with this medium that was very volatile and which I didn't really have a great understanding of. So my number one tip for all artists to find your own style, your own voice, is to master your medium. Whatever that is, you have to be technically proficient in the medium that you are choosing to work in, or that you want to work in order to be able to express your ideas, and in order for you to be able to put your own spin and unique touches on your artwork. You have to be fully fluent in your medium. So the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to study work that you admire and to practice a whole lot. And I'm going to definitely talk more about those two things, but I think that if you're really just starting as an artist and you want to have a unique style, the number one tip I can offer you is to really master your medium, become extremely proficient at handling it and using it, and then your creativity just opens up so much bigger than it ever could have been before that. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to study. So I'm going to go back to, again, when I was a watercolor artist, because watercolor was such a tricky medium for me. I spent so many years early on in my art career trying to figure out how this medium worked. And still, to this day, every time I pick up a watercolor brush, I'm like, okay, this is a real balancing act. But all of those skills that I have put in through thousands and thousands of hours of practice and education, and self-education, I need to say, like, I didn't go to school. I don't have a degree in art. I am self-taught through the use of practice, study, observation, books, things like that. So the second tip I have for you is to study. Now, I think this is something that a lot of people skip over, but I think it's so, so important. And by study, I really mean figure out what type of art you like, what type of art you're drawn to, and then see if you can figure out how they used that medium to create that work. So you're going to do some problem solving, and you're going to do maybe even a little bit of reverse engineering here. You're going to figure out how these people, this artist that you admire, made this piece of work. So some subset steps to this study, number 2, is you're going to need to look at a lot of artwork. That can be online, but I also would really encourage you to look in real life if possible. If you can go to museums, if you can go to a gallery showing, if you can go even to like a toy collection shop or something like that, just look at that and see how the art is made. The second thing under study that I think you can do is look at different art styles, look at different mediums, look at different artists, look at something that isn't necessarily what you think you like. Because a lot of times when we're looking at a big collection of art in a variety of styles, we find things that we like that we had no idea we would have liked if we hadn't searched that out. One of my favorite things to do, actually, and is maybe a little bit old school, I love going to the library. I love looking at art books. I love looking at children's books. I love the illustrations there. Anything that's illustrated, like comic books, graphic novels, I love looking at those. There are even you can find some libraries that have older books that you wouldn't be able to see, maybe even online, and you would really maybe have a hard time buying, and you probably don't want to even buy it. But a library is such a great resource to use to find different art that maybe isn't something that you see on your Explore page on Instagram or on Facebook or wherever you typically browse art online. The art that you find in books that are in libraries can sometimes be decades old, and it's such a cool experience to look at that and see if there's anything in that older art that really appeals to you. Another thing under study that I would suggest that you do, once you have looked at a lot of art, once you have looked at a lot of different styles, a lot of different mediums and artists and work and things like that, I want you to try and see if there's a common thread in all of the art that you have been drawn to. Pay attention to the work that you're drawn to. Maybe try and keep a file of it if you can, like online, that's easy to do online. Maybe you can take pictures, with your phone of art books that you see in libraries, or check the books out. But I want you to see if there's a common thread in the art that you feel drawn to. Is it the theme? Is it the colors? Is it the shapes, the details, the subject? What is it about the art that you feel most drawn to that has a commonality? And once you find out what that commonality is, then you can start applying that to your own work. And the next part of studying is to pick out the details. Pick out the details that you're most drawn to. Figure out how they did that thing that you like. When I was a watercolor artist, when I first was learning, I had young kids at home, and I had a baby who I was feeding a lot. So I was sitting down, and what I would do so often is I would put a painting up that I was working on, or I would look at magazines. At the time I had a lot of art magazines, and I would just study a painting, and I would look at how they were able to create a soft rosy cheek, or how they were able to create really crisp edges of dark and light right next to each other in watercolor. And I would sort of paint it in my head. I would look at it, I would study it, and then I would say to myself, how would I paint that if I were doing that? And I do the same thing with sculptures when I started sculpting. It's a little bit different for me now because I sculpt not realistically, but I sculpt in my own particular defined style. It's cute. It's almost a caricature. It's a cartoon version of an animal. And now that's going to move us along to number 3. So the third tip that I have, remember the first one is master your medium. The second one is study. The third tip that I have for you is to try and create some work in the style that you love. Now, for centuries, artists have learned how to make art by copying the works of masters. Even today, you can file for the right to be able to go to museums and do a master copy of paintings at museums. Now, the caveat here, and this is a big one, is that if you are practicing art from an artist that you love, an artist that you admire, you have to remember to keep this as practice only. This is only for your eyes and your education. This is for your own growth as an artist. This isn't art that you sell. This isn't art that you claim to be your own. This is just for your education, trying to find how you want to create art. So what you're trying to do is test drive a style and see how the work that you naturally make, even when you're trying out a new style, how that differs from the artist that you admire. See if you can begin to recognize elements of your work that are different, that stand out to you, and that's how you're going to begin to find your style and your voice. Tip number 4 is to consider studying and practicing realism. This gives you such a good basis of what anatomy is. If you're doing people, or especially if you're doing animals, this helps you know the rules so that then you can change it for the work you want to do. It gives you an opportunity to exaggerate or minimize features because you know how the original looks. And this is something that animators and illustrators do so often, is they take a very real life subject, they draw from life, they paint from life, sculptors do this too, and then they put their own spin on it to give it more character, to give it their own style. So maybe they elongate the legs a little bit, maybe they add bigger eyes, maybe something that they do is they give it smaller feet, or anything that is either an exaggeration or minimizing something that's already there. Number 5 is to problem solve. I talked about this a little bit earlier. This is essentially what you're doing when you're studying art that you enjoy and you're trying to figure out how to put that into work that you create. What you're doing is you're problem solving. You're going to figure out, how do I get this color of clay? How do I mix this color? How do I get this shape in clay? How do I put this shape that I see in my mind into something that is real in front of me? That's problem solving. It could have something to do with tools. It could have something to do with different materials that you're using rather than what you typically use. This is where you're going to really decide how you're going to create art. Is there a cartoon style that you admire? Is there an impressionistic style that you may admire? Compare the cartoon version to a real life version and see what changes were made. Can you see why they were made? Can you see how they took this very realistic deer and they turned it into Bambi? What did they do differently? What shapes looked different? What did they emphasize? What did they minimize? That's how you start to see how to stylize things. And that's something that you can use to bring to your own work and to your own style. Okay, so tip number 6, and I think this is probably the most important, and this is my little pep talk to you, is don't waste time wishing your style looked like another artist's. Don't wish for somebody else's hands. You have all of the skills right now. You have a beautiful mind, you have beautiful vision, you have ideas that nobody else has. You have this vision for how you want to make art, to put it into the world. So don't waste a minute of any time wishing that you had somebody else's style when yours is so unique and beautiful. No one else sees the world the way you do. I hope that these tips were helpful for you. I hope that you come away inspired. I hope that you learned some things in here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed watching me paint these tumbles. If you found this video useful and you'd love to let me know that you were here, please feel free to leave me a unicorn emoji down below. And once again, thank you so much for watching. I'm grateful that you're here, and be sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you in my next video.